U.S. President Donald Trump asked then FBI Director James Comey to end the agency's investigation into ties between former White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Russia, according to a source who has seen a memo written by Comey. The explosive new development on Tuesday followed a week of tumult at the White House after Trump fired Comey and then discussed sensitive national security information about Islamic State with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The Comey memo, first reported by the New York Times, caused alarm on Capitol Hill and raised questions about whether Trump tried to interfere with a federal investigation. The White House quickly denied the report, saying in a statement it was not a truthful or accurate portrayal of the conversation between the president and Mr. Comey. Comey wrote the memo after he met in the Oval Office with Trump, the day after the Republican president fired Flynn on February 14 for misleading Vice President Mike Pence about the extent of his conversations last year with Russia's ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. "I hope you can let this go," Trump told Comey, according to a source familiar with the contents of the memo. The New York Times said that during the Oval Office meeting, Trump condemned a series of government leaks to the news media and said the FBI director should consider prosecuting reporters for publishing classified information. Coming the day after charges that Trump disclosed sensitive information to the Russians last week, the new disclosure further rattled members of Congress. The memo is powerful evidence of obstruction of justice and certainly merits immediate and prompt investigation by an independent special prosecutor, said Democratic U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal. Republican and Democratic lawmakers said they wanted to see the memo. Republican U.S. Representative Jason Chaffetz, chairman of a House of Representatives Oversight Committee, said his committee is going to get the Comey memo, if it exists. "I need to see it sooner rather than later. I have my subpoena pen ready." In a letter to acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, Chaffetz set a deadline of May 24 for the FBI to produce all memoranda, notes, summaries, and recordings referring or relating to any communications between Comey and the president. Republican Speaker of the House Paul Ryan backed Chaffetz. "We need to have all the facts, and it is appropriate for the House Oversight Committee to request this memo," said Ryan spokeswoman Ashley Strong. Legal experts took a dim view of Trump's comments, as quoted in the memo. For the president to tell the FBI to end a potential criminal investigation, that's obstruction of justice, said Erwin Chemerinsky, a constitutional law professor and dean of University of California, Irvine School of Law. This is what caused President Nixon to resign from office. But the experts said intent was a critical element of an obstruction of justice charge, and the president's words could be subject to interpretation and possibly put into the context of other actions, like Comey's termination. The fact that the president apparently said he hoped Comey would end the Flynn investigation rather than more directly ordering it makes for a weaker but still viable case, said Christopher Slobogin, a criminal law professor at Vanderbilt University Law School. Flynn's resignation came hours after it was reported that the Justice Department had warned the White House weeks earlier that Flynn could be vulnerable to blackmail for contacts with Kislyak before Trump took office on January 20. Kislyak was with Lavrov at the White House when Trump disclosed the sensitive information. A spokeswoman for the FBI declined to comment on the details of the memo. An emailed fundraising appeal by Trump's political organization and the Republican National Committee sent out after reports of the Comey memo said Trump was being victimized by an unelected bureaucracy. "You already knew the media was out to get us," it said. "But sadly it's not just the fake news. There are people within our own unelected bureaucracy that want to sabotage President Trump and our entire America First movement." The new development came as Republican and Democratic lawmakers pressured Trump to give a fuller explanation for why he revealed sensitive intelligence information to Lavrov. The information had been supplied by a U.S. ally in the fight against the Islamic State militant group, the officials said. President Trump asked the FBI Director, James Comey, to shut down the federal investigation into Mr. Trump's former national security advisor, Michael T. Flynn, in an Oval Office meeting in February, according to a memo Mr. Comey wrote shortly after the meeting. "I hope you can let this go," the president told Mr. Comey, according to the memo. The documentation of Mr. Trump's request is the clearest evidence that the president has tried to directly influence the Justice Department and FBI investigation into links between Mr. Trump's associates and Russia. Late Tuesday, Representative Jason Chaffetz, the Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee, demanded that the FBI turn over all memoranda, notes, summaries and recordings of discussions between Mr. Trump and Mr. Comey. Such documents, Mr. Chaffetz wrote, would raise questions as to whether the president attempted to influence or impede the FBI. Mr. Comey wrote the memo detailing his conversation with the president immediately after the meeting, which took place the day after Mr. Flynn resigned, according to two people who read the memo. It was part of a paper trail Mr. Comey created documenting what he perceived as the president's improper efforts to influence a continuing investigation. An FBI agent's contemporaneous notes are widely held up in court as credible evidence of conversations. Mr. Comey shared the existence of the memo with senior FBI officials and close associates. The New York Times has not viewed a copy of the memo, which is unclassified, but one of Mr. Comey's associates read parts of it to a Times reporter. "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go," Mr. Trump told Mr. Comey, according to the memo. "He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go." Mr. Trump told Mr. Comey that Mr. Flynn had done nothing wrong, according to the memo. Mr. Comey did not say anything to Mr. Trump about curtailing the investigation, replying only, "I agree he is a good guy." In a statement, the White House denied the version of events in the memo. While the president has repeatedly expressed his view that General Flynn is a decent man who served and protected our country, the president has never asked Mr. Comey or anyone else to end any investigation, including any investigation involving General Flynn, the statement said. The president has the utmost respect for our law enforcement agencies, and all investigations. This is not a truthful or accurate portrayal of the conversation between the president and Mr. Comey. Mr. Chaffetz's letter, sent to the acting FBI Director, Andrew G. McCabe, set a May 24 deadline for the internal documents to be delivered to the House committee. The congressman, a Republican, was criticized in recent months for showing little of the appetite he demonstrated in pursuing Hillary Clinton to pursue investigations into Mr. Trump's associates. But since announcing in April that he will not seek re-election in 2018, Mr. Chaffetz has shown more interest in the Russia investigation, and held out the potential for a subpoena on Tuesday, a notably aggressive move as most Republicans have tried to stay out of the fray. In testimony to the Senate last week, Mr. McCabe said, "There has been no effort to impede our investigation to date." Mr. McCabe was referring to the broad investigation into possible collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. The investigation into Mr. Flynn is separate. A spokesman for the FBI declined to comment. Mr. Comey created similar memos, including some that are classified, about every phone call and meeting he had with the president, the two people said. It is unclear whether Mr. Comey told the Justice Department about the conversation or his memos. Mr. Trump fired Mr. Comey last week. Trump administration officials have provided multiple, conflicting accounts of the reasoning behind Mr. Comey's dismissal. Mr. Trump said in a television interview that one of the reasons was because he believed this Russia thing was a made-up story. The February 14 meeting took place just a day after Mr. Flynn was forced out of his job after it was revealed he had lied to Vice President Mike Pence about the nature of phone conversations he had had with the Russian ambassador to the United States. Despite the conversation between Mr. Trump and Mr. Comey, the investigation of Mr. Flynn has proceeded. In Virginia, a federal grand jury has issued subpoenas in recent weeks for records related to Mr. Flynn. Part of the Flynn investigation is centered on his financial links to Russia and Turkey. Mr. Comey had been in the Oval Office that day with other senior national security officials for a terrorism threat briefing. When the meeting ended, Mr. Trump told those present, including Mr. Pence and Attorney General Jeff Sessions, to leave the room except for Mr. Comey. Alone in the Oval Office, Mr. Trump began the discussion by condemning leaks to the news media, saying that Mr. Comey should consider putting reporters in prison for publishing classified information, according to one of Mr. Comey's associates. Mr. Trump then turned the discussion to Mr. Flynn. After writing up a memo that outlined the meeting, Mr. Comey shared it with senior FBI officials. Mr. Comey and his aides perceived Mr. Trump's comments as an effort to influence the investigation, but they decided that they would try to keep the conversation secret, even from the FBI agents working on the Russia investigation, so the details of the conversation would not affect the investigation.